お待たせいたしました。ただいまよりパネルディスカッションスタートアップエコシステムのグローバライゼーションを開始いたします。パネリストは HCVC ジェネラルパートナージェリー・ヤン様、イントラリンク VP& ディプティマネージングディレクターブリティッシュチャンバーオブコマースインジャパンプレジデントリチャード・ライル様、インタータンジブルボードオブディレクターズマネージングディレクターウナ・ソフティッチ様、モデレーターは MOL プラス CEO 坂本拓也様にお務めいただきます。それでは坂本様、よろしくお願いいたします。
Hi, thank you very much for introduction, and thank you for attending the grand final session. At first, before introduce the nice panelists, three panelists here, I would like to ask the audience of the what organization you belongs now for a better discussion. So maybe corporate or venture capital startup, I think. So could you raise your hands? You come from the corporate. Oh, maybe more than 50%. And the startup. Okay. And thank you. The venture capital or CVC? Okay. Good. Yeah, anyway, thank you very much. So at first, this panel discussion, the same is startup ecosystem, but this one is a little bit vague definition. So yeah, before moving the introduction, I think it's good to see this one is discussion topics today. So actually, I don't want to conclude the answer today. The purpose is a good discussion for reaching some answer for each other. So the number one, we will talk about the differences between Japanese startup ecosystem and overseas ecosystem. And after that, we would like to discuss what should Japanese startups do to expand the overseas market. And finally, what should overseas startups do to expand into Japanese market. So I hope you will get any insights from our discussion. And also, I heard the question is available from your QR code. Okay, on your table. So please feel free to put your questions during the session. I have iPad here, so I can take it up in this discussion. So far, any questions? No? Okay, let's go. So at first, it's much better to introduce the three panelists. So at first, Jerry?
Thank you, Sakamoto-san. I would love to do this in Japanese, but I think today's just make it, English session. So my name is Jerry. So I'm originally from Taiwan. I'm one of the general partners of HCVC. So we are a Paris-based venture capital firm. I think about 7-8 years ago when I started, fundraising in Japan for our first fund, people have questioned why in Paris, because back then the whole Japan was about Silicon Valley, and started to have a bit of feeling about London. But today, fast forward to today, Paris has become one of the big hubs of European startup ecosystem. Some of the most well-known unicorns in Europe were actually based in Paris. We were lucky and proud enough to be part of that history, to make the history happen. But it was true that 7 or 8 years ago, when I mentioned Paris, people only think about croissant, they think about food or fashion industry, and they will not think about AI or any kind of unicorn there. Like I said, I'm originally from Taiwan, so I spent 12 years in semiconductor. and then across between Taiwan and Silicon Valley, and then I moved to Paris in 2012. So been in Paris for 12 years now. So if you can go to the next slide, that would be great. Thanks. So what is HCVC? So we're a thesis-driven VC firm that we back what we call hard tech founders, and I'll show you a bit what hard tech means. And the mission is to digitize, automate, and decarbonize the physical world. So basically, any startup that's working on full stack solutions, usually including a piece of hardware that is trying to change the physical economy, will be interested. That's to say that we don't do dating apps, we don't do Tinder, we don't do Bumble, we don't do e-commerce, but we do everything else. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. So this is the team. We're currently four, so we started out with 3 partners and we're currently 4. We added the 4th partner. It's a very diverse team. So I'm original in Taiwan. I'm now dual nationality, both Taiwanese and French, live in Paris. My partner Alexis was French and grew up in France, and he used to be an investment banker at BNP Paribas and founded a management firm. On the rightmost, you see Emerick, who is a veteran in Silicon Valley, spent many years in corporate VC, and decided to jump to the independent VC world when he joined us in 2017. He was also born French and grew up in the United States. And we welcome our 4th partner who joined us about 2 years ago. So Alexander was the parents are French, but he grew up in Mexico, and he did his study in Canada and lived in London for 10 years now, so dual nationality, French and English. I'm sorry that there's no female diversity GP in our team, but we do have Asian and Black VC, so that's also quite diverse, I would say. Next slide, please. So what do we do? So we focus on the technology that will transform the physical economy. So that means that things like machine vision, carbon capture, predictive healthcare, low carbon protein, electric mobility. We did 2 nuclear energy investment in the past 2 years. Some of the new computing paradigm, I think everybody's aware how much NVIDIA has increased in its share price, but there's still a lot of opportunities in computing and energy storage. This is just a subset of the kind of investment we do. We also have quite a bit of biotech in our portfolio. Next one, please. We also have a very diverse LP base. The reason I'm in Japan is, as I mentioned, our first fund, which was 43 million euros, we have about 20% coming from Japan. We lost all of those Japanese LPs during COVID, so they didn't come back to the second fund. And so I've been trying to rebuild the LP base here. But I used to come to Japan 3 or 4 times per year before COVID to meet with the clients. But we have a very diverse LP base, so fund of funds, family offices, foundations, financial institutions, family offices. We have Taizo, who was our first backer from Japan and helped us a lot in our first fund. We also have John L. Ken, that was the chairman of Stellantis, Ferrari and Fiat. We have a very strong connection to Formula One. So we also have Toto Wolff, who is our LP as well. And Albert, that was the management. The last slide, please. Yeah, so this is the last one on my side. So we have 5 positive exits of the first fund. Right now, DPI is about 0.4. These are two of our largest exits. So we sold Instacart, we sold Caper AI to Instacart about 2 years ago for 350 million. It was a stock exchange, so we got the stocks of Instacart, and as you know, Instacart is not doing very well on the public market. We just finished the lockup period yesterday, so we were able to sell. We'll see how it goes. Another exit is a Greek company called Augmenta in agriculture. We sold it to, we led the seed round, we sold it to CNHI for 110 million in cash. Lesson number 1, cash is always better than IPO. So that wraps up my self-introduction.
Thank you very much. So let's dive deeper about what is a challenge for hard tech startups in later. Thank you. So next, Richard, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here today to talk. Richard Lyle, been in Japan for 32 years, so most of my career, and a lot of that career in international trade. The last 15 years, I've been working in the tech space at my current company, Intralink. We do a couple of things. Maybe, do you want to go on to the next slide? So Intralink, we're an international business development consultancy, and we do a number of things, but relevant to the discussion today, we're bringing tech companies into Asia and into the Japanese market. We work mostly with later stage companies, so scale-ups. If they're startups coming to the Japanese market, as we'll talk about in a minute, often it's too early for Japanese companies to do business with them because Japanese companies want companies with more developed products and so forth. So we tend to work with scale-ups to bring them into this market. And we also help Japanese corporates with their overseas strategies. A lot of that focuses around the innovation space. So everyone knows about Silicon Valley, but I think as Jerry mentioned, Europe is a very exciting place at the moment for tech on multiple fronts. Tech for us is a bit of a broader brush in terms of areas we cover. So we do cover deep tech, so we do energy, of course, and medtech and life sciences. But we also do technologies around the online space, AI, robotics, computing, quantum, for example. And really, I guess a theme that runs through a lot of our projects of late is definitely sustainability. A lot of Japanese corporations are seeking, sustainable solutions around future fuels, around, using less fuels, optimizing energy, and so forth. So a lot of our projects traditionally were hardware focused, but increasingly they're moving to a software element or an element of both, of course. We've been around for about 30 years, our company, so we've worked with multiple companies across North America and Europe. I think these are really exciting times to be in this space. I've been at Intralink for 15 years. I never get bored because, 15 years ago I was doing TV projects and mobile phone projects. Now it's, a completely different set of technologies I get to work with. So every day when I wake up in the morning, it's like, what's today's challenge going to be? So it's always been really exciting working at this company. And I think the biggest thing that's changed, again, we'll talk about this in the panel, is 15 years ago, Japan wasn't really interested in overseas technologies, or wasn't interested in overseas technologies so much, whereas now I think Japan realizes that there's very difficult challenges that the world faces, and those challenges need solutions from the best people and the best technologies in the world. So there has to be collaboration going forward, and the question is, how can we do it, and how can we do it successfully? So anyway, I've done enough talking, so let me hand back to the moderator.
Yeah, thank you very much. So you have lived in Japan 32 years, right?
Indeed. The original plan was 1 year. I was based in Nagasaki, so I gradually moved eastwards to Tokyo, and I guess I'm settled here for life. It's a great country to be in. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. So we can dive deeper, because we have a question. What is the strength of Japanese startups and the Japanese startup ecosystem? And on the other hand, the other person asked, what is weakness? I mean, ちょっと変です、日本。So something like that. The question is coming here. So yeah, I will try to ask. Yeah, to Richard. Thank you. So Una, yeah, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Sakamoto-san. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. My name is Una. I am from Central Eastern Europe. I'm from Slovenia. And maybe we can just switch to the next slide. My company is called Intertangible. We provide services, engineering services for companies around the world. We work with corporations, we work with startups alike, and we service market with emerging technologies and disruptive innovation. So what we basically do is we provide engineers for creating different projects with emerging tech products. We also provide business consultancy services, and we do in-house products. So the little screenshot that you can see here is basically of one of our in-house products that's getting released next month, and it's actually a hiring platform targeting Japan for hiring people with disabilities. So it's a corporate use case. We collaborate with facilities in regional governments to actually provide people with disabilities to work at corporations and provide a better, more inclusive work environment for everyone. My personal career path actually started in Slovenia at General Motors. Then I moved to Germany where I worked at Intel. My background is in linguistics and in technology. So right now this is a base for AI. Many years ago, nobody actually knew what I was doing. So this is kind of a good thing. My first kind of encounter with Japan was back in 2012 when I received an offer to come to Tokyo and work with a small startup. I was their fourth or fifth employee at the time. It was 2012 at the time when Japanese startup ecosystem was very infantile. And after spending a few months here and learning about all the crazy, great, good, and also hen things about the Japanese startup ecosystem, I went to San Francisco where I helped them set up the business and get overseas clients because their end goal was M&A and they wanted to show to Japan and the world how they're very successful in global markets. So I spent 3 years in San Francisco working on this and returned in 2015. Then I got involved with Nikkei Shimbun and I worked in their innovation team of so-called Sum Series, where we collaborated with governments, startups, and corporates, and worked in domains predominantly in fintech, automotive, but also agri-tech. After that, I joined the AI company Soul Machines as VP Japan, and I helped them set up in Japan and get partnership with SoftBank, get funding from SoftBank in the end as well, and actually, get them started here. So yes, now I actually work as a managing director at Intertangible, but I also advise a number of startups, 2 of them being in Tokyo. One of them is CoinPost, the Web3 company, and the other one is PowerX, the renewable energy company that actually just pitched at the, at hearing room here.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. So now, do you have 3 business cards at this moment?
Yes, so my main job is with Intertangible, the company that I have co-founded with my co-founder, and we specialize in basically providing AI services to companies, but I also advise CoinPost and PowerX, yes.
Okay, so I think that it's my mission to take the concrete episode from the right side one is you have many.
Yeah, sure.
And thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Finally, my name is Takuya Sakamoto. I'm from Shosen Mitsui. The one is Mitsui OSK Lines. I'm leading the CVC of Mitsui OSK Lines. Actually, you know very well, but maritime industry is one of the very traditional historical industry. But I love this industry actually. And then I founded this MOL Plus 3 years ago. So far we have invested 16 startups actually and 3 venture capital fund. Our focusing area is not only Japanese startups, but global. So 60% to global investment. Because MOL Group is one of the ocean shipping company. We have a subsidiary company and a global office over than 40 countries. So that's why I would like to learn from this session what is a good action plan for accelerate the startup ecosystem and activity. Yeah. So thank you very much. So this is my introduction. Yeah. So after this introduction, I think you may understand that all 3 panelists have a different background and strengths. So my mission is I try to get a good insight from this session, and I think actually we have several questions here, but please feel free to input your questions from your QR code. Thank you. Yeah, so this one is discussion topics. which I mentioned at the beginning of the session. So the number one is differences between Japanese startup ecosystem and overseas ecosystem. But what is the goal of this session is to get some of the insights from this number 2 and number 3. So we will move on the discussion topics, but please feel free to cut in the discussion because one by one, just a Q&A is very boring. So please. So the number one is the differences between Japanese startup ecosystem and overseas ecosystem. But the question is here, as I mentioned to Richard, the one of the attendances want to hear about what is the strength and what is the weakness and what is something like a strange points of the Japanese startup and the ecosystem. So especially this one. So at first, can I ask the Richard to comment your comment?
I'm sure. So of course, here I'm going to give you very sort of general comments about those ecosystems. Of course, if you dig deeper, you could argue about a lot of the things. So really today I'm trying to get a feel for some of those strengths and weaknesses that we see. So basically, as we all know, Kishida-san is really sort of trying to boost the startup system here in Japan, which is great. Japan has a lot of potential. The reason I love living in Japan, because Japan loves technology, loves the best things in the world, always strives to be the best. But the startup system here, the reality is it's way behind much of the West in that respect. So it's great to see the government promoting it, but at the end of the day, it has to be Japanese businesses and Japanese startups that really then take up that mantle and change things. So if we look at the startup statistics, we heard unicorns mentioned earlier. There's 13 here in Japan, whereas 712 in the US. Of course, that's only one metric, and that doesn't tell the whole picture. There's differences in the way investment happens here in Japan as overseas, which is why there's less unicorns. But I think it just shows you the difference in scale between the startup ecosystem here in Japan and overseas. And I think it really boils down to the fear of failure. So overseas, startups are actually, you're expected to fail, and actually you learn from your mistakes and you get stronger. Your first startup, it fails. You think, I did this wrong, I did that wrong. The next startup, it fails again. I did that wrong and I did that wrong. And by your third or fourth time, you've learned by your mistakes, all those scars you got on your body from all those mistakes, and you're a stronger and better person. Here in Japan, you can't fail. It's just not a done thing. So I think that's why it's been difficult for startups here to actually take on that. Well, if I fail, what's going to happen? Are my friends and my family still going to talk to me? I can't fail because it's just not done. I think also the other thing to consider here is that a lot of innovation comes out of the large corporates here. I can't remember the exact statistic I saw about 15 years ago, but I think the R&D budget for companies like Toyota and Panasonic is bigger than the whole of the R&D budget for the university system in the UK. It's just the amount of money that gets spent in corporations here is huge. So a lot of innovation happens in corporates here, but not in startups. Whereas overseas, a lot of innovation happens in universities, is then spun out into startups and so forth, and then those companies grow. So the source of innovation is very different between Japan and overseas. So given those two factors, that's why the startup ecosystem here, it's been a challenge. So actually, I think the startups that are in Japan are actually very courageous and incredible that they've actually, broken that mold and gone against sort of culture and society to actually thrive here in Japan. So I think Japan is catching up, but it has a long way to go. And so I think actually rather than look to Silicon Valley or rather than look to sort of Cambridge in the UK, which are well-established ecosystems, I would encourage Japanese policymakers and Japanese startups to look at newly emerging areas such as Estonia, Seoul. Seoul is just across the water, or Singapore. That's where these are, newly emerging places which are very hot. Recently, Intralink, we've been working with Korean startups interested in the Japanese market. So, just companies on Japan's doorstep, which have really interesting technologies, and they're coming across the sea to their neighbor to do business here. So I think I would encourage Japanese startups to look at those newly emerging startup ecosystems to actually see what they're doing. Estonia is another incredible one. It's a tiny country. It punches way above its weight in terms of the startups coming out of there. Estonians are very entrepreneurial, of course, and they're not afraid of. They're very fearless. They're not afraid of failure, of course. But again, I think Japan can have a lot to learn from those ecosystems to actually thrive.
So I think that there are several points here, but I think that what is the most key points for catching up, people side or money side? Do you have idea?
Probably the English language, I think.
Okay.
Yes. So we talked about this earlier. In Europe, the language between a French startup and a Swedish startup or Spanish startup, the language tends to be English. So actually, I would encourage, it's probably the English language that's been the biggest hurdle to date. And that's why a lot of Japanese startups, I think, have stayed local because of that language. But I think to catch up, really, the Japanese government's pouring a lot of money into it. I think it's a mindset change. It's just having the confidence that if you have an idea, you can do it, and then just give it a go and try it. And I think I'm quite hopeful. I think Japan can and does change. Change here happens more slowly. But when I look at the younger generation, they're not really interested in going to work for big corporates. They are thinking increasingly about wanting to go to startups. So I would actively encourage that. So I think the corporates should encourage them to do that. And then I think their peers should encourage them, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I would add to that. I completely agree with how in Japan, the corporate system is very involved, how all innovation is actually driven from the corporates as well. And because also in our audience right now, we have mainly people from corporates, I think it's really important to emphasize that you don't see many other ecosystems where there's so much support. And also there are so many events, there's so many incubators, there's so many accelerators, there are a lot of office spaces. So it's amazing because a lot of startups who actually want to work with corporates, they're welcomed here with open arms, and they can do that. So this is a great thing. And also the corporates are always willing to try new technologies, to do some POCs, to have conversations and figure out how they can collaborate together. But then on the other hand as well, when you look at startups, and it goes to your point, Richard, as well, there's this fear of failing. But at the same time, there is a lot of work with corporations. So I think that a lot of startups are looking at corporates as their role models. So actually, before they go on this long stride of bringing innovation and going towards a goal that might fail, they start implementing a lot of processes that corporations are there for. So one thing for me, working very hands-on with different startups around the world, I was always shocked by the number of productivity tools that Japanese startups are willing to spend time on to kind of find the right place to do this. Or, for example, within the startups, a lot of people, they actually, have to check in daily in the morning. They have their locked working hours. They have to write their NIPO. They have to write for every single, minute of the day how they have spent it. So I think that's really difficult then in that sense, because it really takes away the capacity of humans to really have this creative thinking or to kind of look into partnerships to work with different people when actually their mindset is very, narrowed down to a corporate way. So I think there's a good and a bad way, a good and a bad thing about this, overdeveloped corporate innovation ecosystem, to your point.
Yeah, I think maybe if we move on a higher level, when we're talking about ecosystem, obviously everybody was referring to the Silicon Valley, which is the gold standard. And the Silicon Valley standard evolved over 50, 60 years of history. And in a simple way, it's basically from a startup perspective, you have angels, then you have the seed stage investor and the Series A, and then you have the growth stage investors, and you have the exit. And it comes full circle. It looks very easy. But if I draw a comparison to, let's say, Europe, in the first .com bubble, Europe wasn't very good in terms of like startups, and there were like 50 million exit, 80 million exit bought by telecom companies. So it was very much non-existent. Then as of today, Europe is pretty much complete in the ecosystem, maybe missing a little bit of the growth fund, which was that kind of space was taken up by US growth fund, which had no issue to invest in growth stage startups in Europe. But what happened since 2012 or 2010, let's say, put it this way, is that I think it's the important thing that maybe we can draw the lesson here in Japan as well. Actually, the Silicon Valley ecosystem, the angel part and the VC part, many of them are former founders. This is very important. So let's say you started a company, you become successful, become billionaire, you no longer run the company and you want to do something else. Many of them definitely become angel investors. Cutting a check of 200,000 or 500,000 is nothing for those people. And when that first cycle started to circulate, and then you have people who raise funds to become VC and bring their entrepreneurial experiences into investing in startups, that machine started to run and come in full circle. This happened in Europe the past 15 years. So the first real big unicorn startup in Europe is actually Skype, and Skype is also quite unique because Skype was born out of the Nordic Baltic area, with 15 different founders from mainly from Estonia, Denmark, and Netherlands. So today you see a lot of people who say they're the co-founder of Skype because the team was quite big. It's like 15 people or 14 people. And they literally grew out of, there was a very limited qualified VC resource back then, and they were so successful, they sold to Microsoft for a couple billion. And the first generation of Skype people is a little bit like the PayPal mafia in Europe. They started to start new companies. So for example, when I come to Japan, I use TransferWise, which is called Wise Now, which is a British startup founded by Estonian to withdraw Japanese yen from the ATM. And he was the first engineer hired at Skype, right? So he started new companies and become a billionaire. And then you have Skype, the original Skype co-founding team. Some of them started a big VC firm called Atomico and raised a lot of money and invested in startups. So that kind of machine started to run in full circle around, they say 2012, 2013. And that's when you start to see that the benefit, because one of the things we talk a bit about culture, I think culture is one thing you can grow. I mean, Japan have great entrepreneurs. I mean, one of my favorite movies is the Kaizoku ni Yobareta Otoko, which is about the founder of Idemitsu Koyo. The spirit of entrepreneur is everywhere. It's in every country. So culture is not really an issue. But the question is, how do you, in the setup of a startup, how do you bring that? How do you allow that entrepreneurship to grow in the startup? And what I observe here is that most of the billionaires or successful founders, yes, they might start corporate venture teams, they might start doing some investment, but they're still managing their own companies. So if you look at Nambasan, still managing DNA. If you look at all the founders that are still managing, CyberAsian, Fujita-san, and all that. So it didn't happen that a lot of the billionaires started to, they retired, they started to put their money, put their time into the founders. I think that was one of the pieces that could be missing because right now we're relying on a bit of government pumping money into C-stage VC, and there are people who do angel investment here and there, but most of the people doing angel investment are not billionaires, so they're risking their 10% of their personal wealth that they did in a small exit before, and now they're risking 10%. And if it doesn't work, they will stop doing that. They will stop doing angel investment. So the machine is not running as smoothly as, at least today, that's the case in Europe. So I just want to point that out, that when we talk about ecosystem, that kind of flying wheel is very important, and it will last 20, 30 years.
Actually, now the one question is a good fit here. The one question from the audience, I would like to know your opinion about the role of CEO and founders of the startup company. So in Japan, the strong commitment, if you found some company, right, 10 years, 20 years commitment is good to the strong commitment to grow the company. But in your story, you mentioned the good cycle is one of the the factor to create a good ecosystem? So this question is, I think his or her intention is a strong commitment is one of the important factor. So how do you feel for this?
Yeah, so I think in US you also have founders that run the company for a long time, right? So Jeff Bezos ran Amazon until a couple of years ago before he retired. Jensen Huang, who was actually born in Taiwan, is still running NVIDIA. All his generation of founders already retired, but he's still running NVIDIA, and now NVIDIA is just overtook Google and become the fourth most expensive company on earth. But I think the difference could be that if you look at Japan, I just want to say this, there's nothing super negative about it, but I think people love to be called shacho or kaijo. That kind of people call you shacho. I mean, nobody would call Jeff Bezos Mr. President. They always call him Jeff. So that's part of the thing where I think there was a bit of like, okay, I want to keep, staying in control, being this like, everybody would look at me and address me as like president. And so that running that company becomes super important for some of the founders. I'll give you a very clear guideline, right? So if the company is already public IPO and you're a billionaire, if the company is still growing or like going through transformation, for sure, that makes a lot of sense for the founder to keep running that. But we also see companies that are stagnating. The founders stay there just because they want to stay there. There's nothing wrong about this. It's a personal decision. You founded a company, it's your decision. But in Europe, usually in US and Europe, usually the shareholders will put pressure on the founder. I think the shareholders kind of like power here is also different dynamics compared to US. The shareholder will put pressure on the founder, even if they are founder. For example, one of the US companies is called 23andMe for DNA sequencing for the consumers. The share price dropped 95% from the peak. And the shareholders are piling a huge amount of pressure on the founder. The founder refused to quit. And so this is very different dynamics, right? Because here in Japan, we used to have like, Sony refused to listen to a hedge fund investor's kind of voice. So I just want to point out that if the company is not growing or it's like even like, receding, usually the founder will just retire and hand it over to professional CEO, and they will be able to do something else. Maybe they want to become investor or not. But here, I think the culture, or at least the preference, is that they will run it until somebody kick them out, unfortunately, or something like that. Yeah.
So I think to add to that, so I think it depends on the stage of the company. So in the early stages, the founder is exactly that. They found the company and they're trying to sort of commercialize the technology. But then scaling that is a very different thing. So I think NVIDIA and Amazon are sort of obviously outliers there, but I think most startups or scale-ups overseas, the founders and may be involved with the company, but the CEO is, a different CEO is brought in at a different time to grow that company. So commercializing is very different from scaling a company. Commercializing is important to actually, not fail, to actually commercialize and get sales and start to grow the company. But then scaling that to a bigger company is a different thing. And that's where you do need to bring in other people to do that. And that's where the smart entrepreneurs will know and understand that and step back, or perhaps do other things, make their money and then become angel investors. So I completely agree with the statement about the cycle. I think Japan doesn't have that cycle yet. So if Japan could get that cycle, then it'll help, because I think government money is always going to be government money. I think, business knows business. So, of course, business loves receiving handouts from the government, but at the end of the day, it's business that spends that money and spends it most wisely. So government can support it, but it's going to be the businesses at the end of the day that actually use that money wisely to grow.
Thank you.
I would have maybe just one comment on that, and it was triggered when Jerry mentioned the PayPal mafia. So,
What is...
that's fine, no need. So maybe about 10 years ago, we could see a lot of, founders who were coming from certain circles. It's still today, for example, people are leaving big tech companies and then they're founding their own companies and pitching to investors, sometimes even without like a real product, without a real team, and then they go for it. And right now, with the role of generative AI that's playing everywhere, a lot of companies, I think a lot of founders overseas and, in Europe and some other places, even in India and like some other places in Asia, are building their own, unicorn startup, hopefully unicorn startup with one person. So it's basically all you need is one person and the LLM to tell you what to do and how to structure your pitch, and then maybe you have a chance of doing this. And I think only in Japan I have not heard this type of drive from people to kind of try it out or to kind of question who is going to be the next one-person unicorn founder. Because, you know, the mindset here is completely different, and it goes from building a team from scratch, which I personally prefer, you know, but it's very interesting that, for example, this trend is not catching on, and I don't really think it will. But Jerry, maybe you already had some startups pitching ideas like that to you.
Well, not on that point, but it just occurred to me that I want to also mention, something that was a little bit not like that. So there's also one big question about the LP base, right? So the Europe as it is today, yes, there are government or let's say European Union or sovereign fund kind of like LP, but another big part of the LPs are the family offices. So it's very much become one of the mainstreams of LP for European VCs. And which is important because venture capital is a 10-year cycle. Each fund is like 10 to 12 years, some of them even 15 years. Our good friend Steve Juverson, Future Venture is like 15-year fund. Historically in US, you have endowment fund, university that they have unlimited cycle. They don't have this kind of, we have to return the money at some point. So they were able to do like a fund of 10 years. Canadian pension fund the government allowed them to do VC, so they also become a big LP in American VCs. Europe used to be, you don't have the pension funds, most of the pension funds are not necessarily allowed to do VC, so I think there's some exception like in Netherlands, in Sweden, but most of, let's say, France, Germany, or even in UK, I don't think pension fund can do VC. So if you want long-term capital LP, family office actually become a very good source because they're, Europe is very old, so we have very old families that came from generations, and they grow their family well. So this is important because if you have government being the main source, government changes, right? So look at how many cabinets Japan has since the Second World War, and you change policy and things change and people move around. But if you have like long-term capital source like endowment fund or like family offices that the family members will keep grow on, and you're growing wealth for them for 20, 30 years at least during your time as a VC, then that was a good match. And I think that perspective is very important. Yeah.
Thank you. So now the next question is coming here. So actually, we already don't follow our script, but I think
that's good.
It's good, right? So the one of the audience is now asking what can be done to bring more venture capital firm to Japan. So my first question to Jerry: do you have any Japanese startup portfolio now?
So we don't have any portfolios in companies in Japan. 2/3 of our investment are in Europe, 1/3 in the United States. My personal observation, I still talk to a lot of founders over the past decade when I come here. The main obstacle, and I think it's probably the same thing for a lot of the let's say Silicon Valley VC who came here. They took a look and they left. I think the fact that everything is in Japanese is a big hurdle. People might not believe that, but it is a big hurdle. It's not a question of whether you can do translation or not. Already, we look at 1,000 startups per year. Some of the big funds look at 7,000 startups per year. Unless you're super outstanding, getting over the hurdle that everything was in Japanese and have to understand, the KK system. For example, in the early days, the US VC don't do any startups outside of UK in Europe because UK is common law, and they were so afraid of the continental law where there's some catch here and there, and they would just rather stay with the common law, so they only do UK startups. And imagine that, and imagine the US Silicon Valley VC looking at KK, and they have to learn to speak Japanese, and they have to learn what's the possible thing that might catch them when it's time to exit. That's a big hurdle. Europe has resolved that problem largely now. You still have country law that obviously you have to follow. But then in terms of the company bylaws and in terms of the English documents, almost every country in Europe that have active startup activities are based on English. But I'm sorry, American English, not British English, which is more practical. And so I think that was a big hurdle that you definitely have to over. I think I want to mention another thing is the modern startups start their company based on solving the pain point. And what I've observed in even the successful Japanese startups like Mercari or Samsung, they started with a Japanese pain point. They didn't think about overseas until they need to go overseas, either for raising Series C or going IPO. Mercari tried that. They tried to go to United States and they spend a lot of money on marketing. When we look at startups on early stage, the first question is usually, what is the total addressable market? And the total addressable market is not whether, let's say, for example, if you're doing something similar, like let's say a customer relation software, the total addressable market is not telling me how likely the global customer relation software could be. The question is, your product, the pain point you're solving, if you take everyone that has the pain point, multiply by the price they're gonna be paying, that's your TAM. And I think that's the challenge for a lot of the Japanese local born startup, where many of them are solving a very Japanese specific question. I think Samsung is a very good question. I think this is the country that is still using business cards. And you can almost see from day one as a VC that, okay, unless you can get to 10 billion market here in Japan by itself, this is not, by Silicon Valley standard or VC. But again, the whole business card culture and the whole need to keep business card and changing, also Japanese corporate rotate their members across the association, and so you have this constant update system that is convenient. It's just so Japanese, and so you ended up having this domestic market that going overseas is really a stretch. And I think I talk to young founders, I always tell them, can you imagine your product deployed in US today or deployed in Europe today? That's what you should be thinking about, and how you define your TAM. And that is very, very important. You might have some edge as a Japanese company, but you have to think about your end market as a global market.
Okay. So is there any, this is question to all, but what is the priority of contribution by venture capital CVC corporate for, what can I say, gathering the equity from the global VC, or to address the market? So, yeah. My next question is how we the ecosystem can contribute to the such startups to accelerate the.
Okay, maybe I can just answer this like very quickly. One thing that I have also observed in Japan that I haven't observed elsewhere is that there are so many accelerators and so many programs by corporations to actually work with startups and help them get started, which is amazing. Also, there's possibilities to work on pilot projects and all these things. But also overseas, for example, accelerators are not that popular by especially deep tech startups, because people don't usually have time to allocate to all these programs that acceleration is therefore, and they cannot spend a lot of time getting mentored by different people when they actually have a product to build. They would love to, but they cannot. And for example, especially with Japanese corporations, a lot of these acceleration or support programs, they usually come where a startup would come to the company, and then the company would assemble a team within their corporates to mentor a startup. And I think this is very difficult because while those people are very experienced in this one niche in one corporation, they don't actually have a broad vision where they could provide the right knowledge and experience to startups to actually be successful outside this corporate, small project. So maybe kind of having a broad vision or bringing in experts from different areas or working with other companies within their network is something that I personally would like to see being implemented more.
So if I may. So you're talking about what value add the investors can bring to the startups. Quick answer. So I think from all the startup boards that I'm on as a board member, there are some of the boards function better. There are some of the boards function worse. I think the best the investors can bring to the startups are networks. So introducing new investors to them, introducing growth stage investors to them, helping them hire, let's say, experienced, let's say, chief growth officer, which is usually not part of the team, helping them solve some of the, just introducing them to some mentor, just holding hands and making them safer. There are a lot of VCs or investors that try to bring value through operation. I think it's very dangerous. The reason is because if this is a very simple question, right? Let's say if you're a former corporate person that's become a VC, or if you're a CVC and you believe that you're very good at operation, and you try to help the founder with operation, if that works, you should have done it in your corporate. You don't need a startup to do it. The reason startup keep coming up with new products and beating the corporates is exactly because they operate in a very different way. So there are some former founders that were successful and come back and become VC and trying to help the startup on operational side. That one I think works, but I also saw some of the boards I was on. They were like, let's say, General Motor people who try to bring their experiences at General Motors to help EV startup. I mean, it's not like General Motors is super successful in electric vehicle, and what kind of lesson can you teach the founders? But people want to help, right? So sometimes you see the negative effect. So I just want to highlight. I just want to say, most of the time I tend to take a step back, and there will be things where we can just remind them, okay, probably you shouldn't be doing things this way or that way. But I think by and large, networking and helping them hire people is the two most important value that the VC can bring to the investor can bring to the startups.
Okay. Richard side, you also try to accelerate the globalization of the Japanese corporate. So, do you find some missing piece for Japanese corporate, or what is the priority to adding value to the globalization to for corporate or Japanese startups?
Yeah, so I think the missing piece is knowledge, right? So technology is fast moving and fast changing. So we assume that people in big Japanese corporates know everything about their companies and their technologies. The truth is they don't. So again, this is where I think collaboration is really important. So I think it's really important for corporates to have a global innovation presence so they can understand what's happening around the globe. So again, traditionally it used to be go to Silicon Valley. You look at how many Japanese companies have operations in Silicon Valley. They should have them globally. So in Europe, in Israel, in other places. And of course, that is happening. So I think that's the first thing to say. And then I think probably it's actually bringing entrepreneurs into those corporations that actually truly understand how it works. Because I think when you look at startups and Japanese corporations, the expression "they're from Mars and we're from Venus" really sort of springs to mind. They're on two very different planets. The corporations, they're talking about big numbers and loads of people and loads of resources. The startup, they just spun out a couple of weeks ago. And a really interesting idea, but there's a massive mismatch there in terms of how they can actually concretely work together. So I think first is actually understanding what's out there, and then secondly is then being able to bring it in. Because the other challenge we see is that Japanese corporations are not around the world, they try and bring them in. At the corporate level, everyone's excited, but at the business unit level, they don't want to know because there's just there's a mismatch. It's a pain point that perhaps the business unit feels that, oh no, we should be able to sort of solve that pain point. So again, I think it's got to be a change in mindset to actually do that. So I think it's knowledge, it's increasing networks, and it's use cases. As we see more and more of these happening, we see there'll be failures, but there'll be success cases, and seeing what worked in that collaboration in the past.
Thank you very much. Question. So I think our question is a little bit the skip. Una, I think Yeah, I think that we can talk about the last question, because I think the several questions to expand into the Japanese market. Yeah.
My work with Soul Machines, which was, for which I worked as VP Japan here, and got them partnership with SoftBank, and later funding with SoftBank, local partners, local contracts, and so on. I think it's Japan is a country, so they really need to know within this target market what they are targeting, because a lot of different, especially tech companies, who do they want to partner with? What can they bring, and especially what kind of value they can provide for the market in Japan. And also at the same time, they really need to invest a lot of time into this market. I think a lot of startups that come to Japan the first time, they see everything through the pink glasses, because Japan is a very welcoming place. So a lot of corporations are going to be happy to have initial meetings, to have initial conversations. They will always be very optimistic about this. And a lot of times foreign startups, they come back to their headquarters somewhere in the US or Europe or whatever, and they say, hey, we're rocking this. Japan loves us. They want us. This is great. Let's just go for it. But they really need to conduct a very specific market research and also hire local people with local knowledge. And, one thing is the same as Richard and Jerry said, and, you also emphasize that there's so many documents that they need to work on, but also they need to have this person, a few people in Japan who truly understand where the market is going and how the value can be brought in. And then another thing, a lot of these things actually come from my personal frustrations working with startups from overseas. I think many of them, they don't actually want to engage in pilot projects or POCs. They don't want to do things the corporate Japanese way. So I think they need to be a little bit more open-minded in that sense. And understand that, that one partnership may lead to another here, and it's really important to network in a business way here in a different way. And also, I think the biggest emphasis is that they cannot run Japan out of a different country. And this is something that I think we see with many startups that are actually quite successful worldwide. A lot of them have operations, for example, for APAC, including Japan, which is running out of Australia. And Australia is, so far away from everything. So especially for Japan, this doesn't make sense. So yeah, from my experience and my frustration, I think those are the kind of main points.
I think I can just highlight one thing, that how different this country is from the other country. So when it comes to B2B, this is the only country where we see HR software, accounting software, let's say customer CRM software running television commercials to promote their products. No other country does that. Not in the United States, not in UK, not in France. No, nobody does that. I think the businesses in this country has a fundamental mistrust about something that's not already that they know. We see that in kind of the lateral connection between today, in the Naruto we talk about like Mitsubishi Group with all the different Mitsubishi Group with all the different Mitsubishi. This kind of lateral connection was very strong. So they kind of mistrust something that was brand new. So much so that even if you're a Japanese startup, you have to run TV commercial to be able to get the name out. And that's why you see all those like commercials like HR software and all that. I don't think you can change that. I think more and more, at least there's one thing happening now. Younger generations, the consumers are moving to, they mostly spend their time on YouTube. So we're seeing, compared to 10 years ago, to enter Japan, the internet advertisement is more and more effective today. But the TV is still a very, very strong signal of confidence. And so I think that's just something you cannot bypass. One of the good examples is, I'm just going to finish this one. So we mentioned TransferWise. So Shrimp actually came to Japan quite early, and Tabe, because I know the founder, Tabe just refused to run TV commercial. He said, "We never run TV commercial in UK or in any country. Why should we run?" And it took them another 2 to 3 years before they finally got recognized by Japanese. This is a wonderful service for them. I guess it's just one lesson where sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and hire some Johnny's associate people to run some commercial or something.
I think, Jerry, I would totally agree with you, and I have to confirm that to me personally, those TV commercials inside taxis, the meta commercials, those are the best.
Okay, so thank you very much for the a lot of insight for this theme. We need to move to the final party after this discussion. So, yeah, from Una, could you say your final words to all the discussion topics? If you, want to say the last words to the, if you didn't mention here. So, yeah. From 1 minute, please.
Yes, maybe I think the main conclusion is that Japanese companies or startups who want to go overseas or want to work with, overseas, they should just go for it. I think the biggest blocker for people not doing it is that they usually think, we're a Japanese company, we do things differently. Just go for it, especially for emerging markets. Technology is a universal language, and just doing things, but actually, having the whole team adopt the global mindset and going for things. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, thank you.
That's it.
Thank you, teacher.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think basically the time for collaboration is here. It's a reality. So if a Japanese corporation thinks they can do everything by themselves these days, I think there'll be a dinosaur, and we won't see them in a few years' time. So I think collaboration is a word for me, that the whole world has to collaborate. That's not just Japan and Japanese and startups and foreign startups. The whole world needs to collaborate. It's a global phenomenon. So we need to embrace it, and then I think we'll be successful.
Thank you.
Just one random comment. So, so I think the on highest level, I personally believe, because I speak 6 different languages and I travel a lot, I believe entrepreneurship is the same everywhere. You have great entrepreneurs because it's part of human beings, innate kind of like desire to start something new. If you're an entrepreneur, there's no point of really tying your hands and believing that this is only what you can do here and there. Great entrepreneurs always find solutions to overcome something. And I always try to find those kind of entrepreneurs. And so despite the fact that today we talk about the differences between Japan ecosystem everywhere, but to be honest, when it's a great entrepreneur, it's never an issue. They always find a solution to get it done. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's time to end, so I will close this session. But anyway, thank you very much for attendances from our last session. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sakamoto-san.
ジェリーアン様、リチャード・ライル様、ウナ・ソフティッチ様、坂本様、ありがとうございました。今一度盛大な拍手をお願いいたします。